DA phansi phansi nge-DA phansi phansi nge-DA phansi phansi nge-DA phansi siyawuthatha umhlaba siyawuthatha siyawuthatha umhlaba siyawuthatha siyawuthatha umhlaba siyawuthatha siyawuthatha umhlaba siyawuthatha amandla amandla amandla.
Welcome to another episode of the podcast, Andile Mngxitama podcast. Well, today we're going to talk about something that we can all avoid, food. And to talk about how the food production companies, which operate on the basis of the logic of capital, profit making, is basically part of a poisoning machinery that produces foods which make us sick. They make a profit from the food, but through also interlocking directorship and ownership of these companies, they run the pharmaceutical companies, which also make money out of our wellness. We know there's the saying that you are what you eat. This is true. If every single day you eat genetically modified organisms, you are going to find yourself in health problems. Now, in South Africa, 90% of our maize is GMO. 90% of our staple diet is GMO. The maize that we eat is banned in Europe, in China, in Russia. They feed this stuff to animals. They will not give it to people, because GMOs in those countries who take the health of their citizens seriously, GMOs are considered unhealthy. Europe will not eat GMO maize, but companies in South Africa which are linked to Europe basically feed us every single day these GMO foods. Of course, maize is already a non-indigenous food which came here through the colonizer who have stolen it in Latin America. We ate a different type of a diet. But because we know colonialism just doesn't take your land, but it also controls what you eat. It controls what you wear. It controls your own self-perception. So we ended up in South Africa eating maize, umbila, as the staple diet. Now, initially it was basically organic, quite healthy. But over time, because of the concentration of the agricultural sector, by the way, in South Africa, only about 5,000 farmers control 80% of the food that comes to the market. And only about 5,000 massive multinationals control the agricultural produce in this country. So our food production is highly concentrated and highly controlled, and it is produced to maximum profits and to cause havoc with the environment and the health of the nation. Our people, for instance, as we say, eat this GMO from morning to evening. And we then wonder, why is it that South Africans are such a sickly nation? It is because we eat poison, which is produced as food by these greedy companies which control the South African agricultural sector. So part of the land return project is to make sure that we change the paradigm of food production so that food can become what it is, medicine, again, instead of being what it is now, poison that compromises our health in South Africa. And we know that this production of commercial, large-scale, mechanized, GMO-driven is not just harmful to people, it is also harmful to the environment. As we speak, South Africa is a GMO country, and seeds are not available. And you know, the thing about these seeds is that they are called terminator seeds. In the organic situation, you plant fruits or crops, you keep some seeds for the next season. But these genetically modified organisms don't operate like that. You can't take the seeds from the produce and plant them. They are castrated. They will not produce new plants. You have to go and buy annually both fertilizer and the seeds. And so it is a system of food production which is colonized to lock you into a process where you are dependent for next season, dependent on the multinational which must provide you with seeds. It is a deliberate process of castrating, if you like, the seeds so that you are dependent on the multinational. And we know that these genetically modified seeds require serious other inputs such as fertilizer, which comes again from these multinationals. If you don't fertilize your genetically modified seeds, they will be overrun by pesticides and also other natural processes. So you are enslaved to the multinationals that has colonized our seeds and have colonized the fertilizers that gives life to these plants. But on the other side of consumption, when we eat these things, we actually get unwell. And when we do get unwell, we must go get pills from these same companies which initially have poisoned us. Now, South Africa is a semi-arid country. In other words, only 20% of South Africa is highly productive. But this 20% is owned by these about 5,000 massive landowners. And all of them are related to the multinational companies which supply them with seeds and supply them with fertilizers. As a consequence, 90% of the food of our maize that we eat is genetically modified. This is deliberate poisoning our people for profits. That is why our nation is so unhealthy, because every single day, imagine feeding our babies this genetically modified food, which, as we know, are not good for our systems. But our agriculture is not driven by human concerns. It's not driven by addressing food security. It is not driven by feeding the nation. It is driven by notions of profits. They put profits before people. And that is why our people end up in this situation where nations are so unhealthy. And ours is worse. I mean, even Zimbabwe, here across the border, they rejected GMO maize, despite the difficulties they have sometimes with drought and even food insecurity. Of course, they do then sometimes get maize supply from South Africa, which then means that there's a corruption of their food system by these compromised South African produce, which, as we know, is 90% genetically modified. So the colonizer just doesn't control what you think, what you wear, but it also controls what you eat. And we know that from what we eat, our health is affected. We are being poisoned systematically by the South African agricultural corporations for profits. And our government does nothing to protect the nation against these greedy money makers who are poisoning our food systems, and not only just poisoning them, as you know, corrupting them by bringing in these genetically modified organisms. We have to maintain our health by going back to organic foods, organic chickens. You know, you can, of course, see the difference between an organic chicken and the chicken that comes from the machine. I mean, the quality of the meat is simply different. But that is also true with beef. Even with mutton, the quality of food from genetically modified organisms is generally weak, but plentiful. And that's why, of course, it makes us fat. We need to eat more because of its nutritional value is generally compromised. And as we say, these things lead to sickness. We are being poisoned for profits by greedy South African farmers. Therefore, land returned to our people must be informed by a different paradigm of food production. We must go back to organic food production so that we produce foods which will deal with hunger but also address health concerns and make sure that we build a healthy nation. It can be done. It must be done. We believe, for instance, that we can create over 3 million jobs in the agricultural sector through radical land redistribution. Right now, the agricultural sector is creating less than 500,000 very poorly paying jobs. The whole agricultural sector is not just bad because of what it produces and how it produces it, but it is bad also in terms of the treatment of people on farms. It is highly unethical food production system. It is in fact based on slavery. When you open the fridge every morning and get that milk, or when you break that egg for breakfast, you have to ask yourself, where does this egg come from? If you were to look into the value chain of where the egg come from, you will be shocked to find at the beginning an underpaid, underfed, highly exploited, abused, and even sickly person. In the Western Cape, these slaves on farms, they are being paid with alcohol. They are in a perpetual state of drunkenness. They give them what they call papsak, this cheap, residue of wine-making process. And our people get hooked into this, and then it even leads to affecting children when they are still unborn. And when these children are born, they're born with deformities, and they're also born into the same cycle of growing up, working on the farm, being a slave, being drunk. That's what's happening in the Western Cape winelands. But the treatment of black people on farms, we all know that people are still slaves on farms. That is why white farmers kill our people with no consequences, as we can see. But the unethical relations between the farmer and the farm worker is produced or reproduced in the relationship of the food which is produced with our health system. These relations are all unethical, all harmful, and they must be stopped. And the best way to stop them is to end the South African agricultural system. The modern South African agricultural system is highly mechanized. It is highly implicated in GMOs. It is driven by the profit motive. It is not driven by the idea of feeding the nation and food security. It is rather a cash-based economy, and it is making profits for a very tiny minority which don't care for the environment or the people. And that is why we have a systematic poisoning of the nation by these multinational companies through their friends in the agricultural sector, all this done for profits. We have to stop it. And the best way to stop it is by creating a new farmer based on the redistribution of land and an ethical relationship with the land and the food, so that we can have a healthy nation from the healthy food that a new society must produce. It's related.
Phansi nge-DA phansi. Phansi nge-DA phansi. Siyawuthatha umhlaba siyawuthatha. Siyawuthatha umhlaba siyawuthatha. Siyawuthatha umhlaba siyawuthatha. Siyawuthatha umhlaba siyawuthatha. Amandla! Amandla! Amandla!